really, ironically, is defined by our unconsciously held economic theories about how things have to work and how things are limited. Specifically, Gary, please, the next slide. Specifically, that markets have to deliver the solution to climate change. In the national debate, and really in the international debate, there's an assumption that the role of government in climate change it's a finessing agency. It's limited to finessing change in the private sector. It can change its subsidies. It can change its taxes. It can set standards and targets and goals. It can establish regulatory regimes to influence the behavior of these corporations. You can count the corporations that are causing climate change on, if not on your hands, on two sets of hands. There are very few entities that are actually causing this crisis. And they'll turn around and say, we're all causing it. It's our lifestyle that's causing it. I would hold today that that is part of the box, the policy box that we're stuck in. There are two camps. One camp says, it's sort of the Dick Cheney school that says that conservation is virtue. It's moral virtue. That if more people bought Priuses and more people invested in energy efficiency, now Al Gore made this mistake in his film as well, that if people individually as consumers were more virtuous in their consumption patterns, that it would solve the problem. That's one school. Then there's the technology school that says we have to wait, the kind of Google school that says we have to find the great earth-shattering technology. E is less than C. Find the technology that's cheaper than coal and you found the solution. I would suggest to you that both are wrong. We cannot wait for markets to deliver the solution. We cannot wait for technology, and we cannot wait for individuals to become more virtuous to solve this problem. Instead, please carry the next slide. Real change for a sense of the precedence or background of dramatic changes in response to a perceived public need or a perceived crisis. One example, a very good one on the technology side, is telecommunications. The transformation of telecommunications over the past 30 years is revolutionary. From the 1970s, when the telephone company owned your telephone, called it a terminal, and would not allow even fax machines to be used except for military applications, to today, when the phone in your pocket is more advanced than the computers that control the grid. That's a fundamental truth of the time. The grid has no intelligence in it, but your cell phone is more powerful than a mainframe computer was 40 years ago. That's a transformation, and that is the kind of transformation that is needed in the energy industry. Not merely an incremental change, a mitigation of the current system, a 10, 20, 30% improvement. We're talking about a total transformation that fundamentally changes the nature of energy. That's what's required. It will not come incrementally. This quote from Bob Galvin, the former CEO of Motorola, expresses an interest on Wall Street and among the banks to deliver this kind of change. And in a sense, consensus on climate has been achieved in the United States. The question is, how do we get there? Please go to the next slide. How do we get to an 80% carbon solution? Now, implicitly, an 80% carbon solution means 100% carbon solution in the power sector. It means a 90% solution in the transportation sector. And it means a 60% solution everywhere else, because the hierarchy of influence of governments goes from top to bottom in that order. Governments have enormous control over the energy sector. They have limited control over the transportation sector, and they have very little control over the other third of the cause of carbon in the world. And so 100% solution. If you consider 100% solution in the next few decades, that means that we must physically replace the entire energy supply, physically, in just a few decades. This is a non-incremental event, and the public works precedent, again, is the most appropriate kind of paradigm to view what has to occur. If we go back to please, the next slide. If we go back to precedents in history where public works were implemented, the most famous was the cholera epidemics of the mid-19th century. There were several waves of cholera epidemics in the United States, which were far more devastating in Europe than they were here, but they were significant. And New York City was the epicenter of some major epidemics. Proposals, of course, the epidemics were concentrated in the ghettos. And the debate around the cholera, and some of you may have studied, I know there's at least one historian in the room, and there have been books written that I studied about the cholera debate. And initial debate in New York focused on the relationship between cholera and poverty. And the Chamber of Commerce in New York believed and declared that cholera was caused by public immorality, by immigrants, primarily Irish immigrants, who were dirty, promiscuous, and drunkards, and that it was their lifestyle that was causing disease, and that the solution to the cholera was to improve their lifestyle. Very reminiscent of the conservationist virtue school of technology that says we have to improve our lives. It's our fault. We have to improve how we live. Now, there's validity to the notion of changing how we live. I'm not saying it's not valid. But the notion that we could achieve 100% transformation of the energy system over a few decades through that approach is inane and irresponsible. It is physically impossible to do so. Over the course of 2 decades, the debate raged in New York City around proposals for municipal water and sewer system. Chamber of Commerce called it a form of communism. The violation of private property, the digging of trenches across people's yards, nefarious pipes linking everyone's homes, formerly isolated, discrete homes were now connected through underground networks. All of our refuse combined into pipeline systems. They consider this to be dangerous precedent. And yet today, who would say that owning a toilet makes you a communist? It's unthinkable and absurd. And yet that's precisely the same sort of quality of debate that we find today around public interference in the energy sector. Now, we are coming out of the Cold War, after all, and the Cold War was largely fought around preventing communism in the energy sector. There is a powerful resistance to government interference in energy. And I would make the case, and I have many times before, that's precisely what we have to face. Fear of government interference in the energy sector, because waiting for the energy industry to deliver the solution to the problem that it has caused is effectively waiting for Godot. Godot will never arrive. The growth in carbon emissions is outstripping all action to reduce carbon by far. In fact, it's laughable. And the U.S. increase in carbon since Kyoto is very disturbing, and that's what's leading these scientists and opinion leaders to declare nuclear the only solution. Because a look at the math, please, the next slide, would tend to make one very pessimistic. Now, just in terms of my own background, I started about 15 years ago and wrote community choice law in Massachusetts, and then went on to help to draft similar laws in Ohio and New Jersey and California. And another law was passed in Rhode Island. So there are now 5 states that allow city governments to decide what kind of energy to purchase as communities through their local government, through a process very similar to the selection of municipal garbage collection, the franchise authority of cities, which is a 500-year-old authority, part of the organic authority of cities in most states. I know that Ohio has a very strong home rule tradition, and the authority of cities to protect the public health and welfare is the foundation of this authority to award exclusive contracts to private entities to provide essential services to a community. Community choice, in a sense, is a reinvention of that really age-old authority. And so I've spent the last 15 years developing this approach, and it went from Massachusetts in 1995 and was passed in 97 to Ohio in 98, was passed in 99, and to California. Really, I also helped in New Jersey, but in California I drafted the community choice bill in the late 90s, and it was finally adopted in 2002. Next slide, please, Gary. And I'm sorry, Gary, I missed one point on that. Would you mind going back?